Everybody, and happy holidays. I'm Doug Pickford. I'm the president, CEO of the Dulles Area Transportation Association. I want to welcome everybody. This is, I guess, our third annual legislative roundtable. I appreciate all the participants being here today. We're still waiting on Chairman McKay. But I'd also like to recognize, because today is also the 81st anniversary of Pearl Harbor Recognition Day, and I would like to recognize all of those who have sacrificed so much for our country and the preservation of our democracy. Data's been working a lot with some veteran organizations over the past few years, and it really gives me an appreciation of the courage and dedication that our soldiers and veterans have exhibited. And I just really want to give a shout out to all of you who might be a veteran on this webinar, as well as those that have fallen. I'd also like to recognize, as you all would all know, a significant milestone that we passed on November 15th. And that was obviously the opening of Silverline Phase 2. Really, it's a game changer for our organization and the region, frankly. We're extremely excited about the future and the impact that the Silverline will have, and it will really transform Data's operations going forward. And at the ribbon cutting, there were numerous comments about the effort involved and getting to November 15th. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears were involved. But more importantly, a number of the speakers expressed what a great investment this is in our region. And I concur. It will be and will continue to be a great investment for our region. And so, speaking of investments, I would like to recognize the sponsor of today's webinar, is Transurban, and Data and Transurban have been great partners over the years. We are a big supporter of their efforts to improve mobility in the region. And I would just like to give Brent McKenzie a few minutes to say a few words.
Well, good afternoon and Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you, Doug, for that introduction. Transurban is honored to support the Dulles Area Transportation Association's legislative event. As Doug mentioned, we've had the pleasure of working with DATA for the last few years to support many of their efforts, in particular the Northern Virginia Veterans Association, and we look forward to continuing that partnership. This past November, the Commonwealth of Virginia and Transurban marked the 10th anniversary of the opening of the first express lanes. In those 10 years, we've helped nearly 10 million travelers save more than 33 million hours. The express lanes have supported the region's economy, creating an estimated $8 billion in economic activity and more than 50,000 jobs, all while providing multimodal solutions that are driving new businesses to the area and really helping grow our existing small businesses here. Since the lanes opened, we've seen more than 105% growth in both HOV trips and bus trips. And the express lanes have really transformed how people travel here in Northern Virginia, giving all of us multiple options of how to traverse our daily commutes and really go about our daily lives. We've worked to connect people to what's important to them, to their friends, to their families, and all that this great region has to offer. You know, I'm lucky in my job. I get to do a lot of community outreach and out at public meetings all the time. And I hear every day the stories of how the express lanes are impacting people's lives. And, you know, whether that's the security guard at the Pentagon who told me about how he uses the express lanes once a week so that he can stay home a little bit later in the morning, have an extra bowl of cereal with his girls, and then get them off to school, still make it to work on time. Or the dozens and dozens of stories that I hear from parents who use the lanes to get home on time so they don't miss an inning of their kids' ball games or a minute of their recitals. I never lose sight of the awesome impact that we're making every day. And that impact doesn't stop on our roadways. Over the last decade, Transurban has contributed more than $2.3 million to more than 350 different nonprofits to fight food insecurity, homelessness, to create a cleaner environment through tree plantings and water cleanups and dozens and dozens of other initiatives. For more than 10 years, Transurban's focus has been to strengthen the communities along the corridors in which we operate. We're proud of the partnerships that we've built, like this one with Data, and we look forward to working with you all over the coming decades. Thank you again for having me here today.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, we look forward to working with you in the future as well. With that, I'm going to turn the program over to my chairman, Jeff Fairfield.
Thanks, Doug. Really hard to believe it's been 10 years of hot lanes. You know, when those first opened, I said I'd never use one. Now I drive it all the time, so it becomes a habit after a while. But yeah, thank you, Transurban, for your sponsorship. So this is the Transportation Roundtable. We have a very distinguished panel to address regional transportation issues this afternoon. We have the chairs of the 3 major Northern Virginia jurisdictions. I say that because I don't think there's anybody from Arlington or Alexandria on the video. So we have Jeff McKay, the chair of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. We have Phyllis Randall, chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, and Ann Wheeler, the chair of the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. Congressman Jerry Conley, who's been a regular participant in these panel discussions year after year, unfortunately couldn't make it today because he has the sad duty of attending the funeral of his colleague, Congressman Don McKeechin, who tragically and unexpectedly died last week. And we certainly remember Congressman McKeechin and his family in our prayers. But anyway, I wanted to make that notation of why Jerry's unable to attend. Now, we couldn't ask for a better moderator of this panel discussion than our old friend Adam Tuss, who's been very, very kind and supportive of Data for many years. Adam, we have a commitment to do this roundtable next year in person. We hope we can coax you to actually come out to a hotel in Northern Virginia and we can meet and greet everybody in person. But for those of you who don't know, before Adam became a weekend anchor on Channel 4 and a local celebrity, he was a transportation beat reporter first for WTOP and then for Channel 4. And he still keeps very closely attuned and abreast of transportation issues, developments, and challenges in the region. So there's no better resource than Adam to chair this panel discussion. So I think I've talked entirely too long, and I will yield the floor to Adam. And Doug put together some bullet points here on your talking sheet. So, but I know you don't even need that. You're a pro, so it's all yours, Adam.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Doug. Thank you to Data for having me again. 3rd year in a row that we're doing this virtually. I think back to like 2 years ago, and just to kind of put us in the mindset of what we're going to talk about from a transportation perspective. It's like 2 years ago when we did this, we were talking about vaccines, right? And like who was going to get the vaccine. Last year, we were talking about, are we getting back to any sort of sense of normalcy from the pandemic? And then this year, it does kind of feel like we're pulling out of the height of the pandemic. We got the Silver Line open, obviously, express lanes, a whole lot to talk about. So we'll get into all of that. And thank you guys for having me here for sure. And thank you to Jeff, Phyllis, and Ann for participating here. And certainly we're going to miss Congressman Conley, who always seems to make some news on this webinar. I will tell you, I will go back over and over again, and I get stories from this event. And that's one of the reasons that I keep coming back, is because maybe I lull you all into being so honest, and maybe that I do appreciate that. So if there's any news you'd like to break, and I will remind you over and over again during this program, you are certainly welcome to break that news, and I will come back and I'll put it on TV. So that's how that works. I'm just going to go down the line here, and I guess we can just start with an opening statement or a thank you for being here. And I'm going to do it just by order. So Jeff, good to see you. You know, I've known you for a long time. Obviously going back to our Metro board days, and look at you now, you're building pedestrian bridges above the Beltway. It's unbelievable. Why don't you just give a little welcome and give us some thoughts. Oh no, we're still not learning mute. You're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened here. And by the way, I'm definitely not Amir, which is what my caption says. So I was actually trying to show you my techno prowess and change the name on my screen as I'm borrowing a computer of a staff member in my office. That's not the news I want to break. But it is good to be with you, Adam. Good to be with my friends, Ann and Phyllis. And, you know, there is so much happening. And I think you couched it right. You know, we're in a post-COVID world right now. We're certainly not entirely out of it, but at least I am very excited about, you know, where we are and getting back to some level of normalcy. As you mentioned, the Silver Line, the I-66 express lanes opening, big deals. I think, you know, now we have to make sure we focus on getting people on the Silver Line and getting people back to work, which is, I know, one of the things we're going to cover here today. But I'm very excited about the transportation horizon. Certainly in Fairfax County, our focus is on getting people on these trains, but also getting some of our other major infrastructure projects done. And I'm really looking forward to BRT on the Route 1 corridor. I'm really looking forward to BRT on Route 7, and taking the momentum that we had from the Silver Line and transferring it into other projects, and really starting to take transit much more seriously as a region, as something that not only is a great equalizer for a lot of folks, but a necessary climate change response, and frankly, the safest way for anybody to get around our region. And so exciting times, I think, for all of us to remain optimistic about what the future holds, and certainly really excited to be with data in light of the Silver Line and the blood, sweat, and tears that so many of us put into getting that project online was really a victory lap for all of us, and something we can all celebrate and take that momentum into other projects as we move forward. And so, you know, the General Assembly is getting ready to meet, and I'm hopeful that that they can take some of this momentum as well. And I know it's another topic that we're going to cover, but I still remain very worried about the state's commitment to transportation and adequate funding long term. I spoke highly about the Silver Line as being an investment, not an expense. We need the state to invest in transportation, and we need it now when they're sitting on a massive surplus of money. That is the best way to really invest in Northern Virginia, which is, of course, essential to the state's economy. So looking forward to the conversation today, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, don't spend it all just yet, Jeff, but thank you for all of that. Chair Randall, good to see you. Any opening thoughts here about you know, where we are from a transportation landscape?
Well, thanks for having me, Adam, and I really appreciate being here for the third year. Data is such an important organization. The Silver Line opening was, one, really, really fun, and two, awfully important for a lot of different reasons. I always want to talk about the board that said yes to the Silver Line, and my predecessor, Scott York, and the vision they had when they opened the Silver Line, both economic visions for what that would do. But as my friend Jeff said, and it is really good to be here with Jeff and Ann, also what it will do for the environment, taking cars off the road and the transit. But for Loudoun County, I think the thing that I might be the most excited about is we get to build a whole urban policy area right around the Silver Line. And so, you know, we are where Reston Town Center was 25 years ago. And we are starting right now to get applications in and to talk about what uses we want to see, not now, but in 2040, and how we put down interim uses at this moment, and so that we're ready for that in the future. We're building it, and so that's the goal is to build our urban policy area in a way that is that doesn't require every family to have two cars, hopefully just one car, in a way that is equitable, that allows for attainable housing. And I'm very careful to say the word attainable and not just affordable housing in that area. I have said many times that we want to invite our developers to be creative and build dense and vertical so that we can do more housing. I believe that near mass transit, you should do dense vertical housing. And so the Silver Line for Loudoun County is just the start of something that's going to be great and massive economically, environmentally, and for the very needed housing problem that we're all experiencing. As we go into the General Assembly session, there are a lot of things that we're going to talk about. I do hope that we talk about the governor's announcement that he'd like to possibly see the General Assembly taking over some zoning and land use duties from the counties. We certainly don't want to see that happen for various reasons that we can talk about as we get into it a little bit more. I can tell you, if you want to break news, that that the VML, the Virginia Municipal League, and BACO, Virginia Association of Counties, are already starting to gear up for that discussion. I won't say fight because I don't know that it's going to be a fight. I think it's more of a discussion to do some education with the governor as to why it's important to leave zoning and land use to counties. And so that's a discussion that we can certainly get into. But I'm just really happy to be here and appreciate the discussion we're about to have.
Excellent. And Chair Wheeler, initial thoughts?
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here with Phyllis and Jeff, as always, being included. I mean, we are now actually really connected to the rest of the region now that we have the express lanes. It really feels that we're sort of part, and you can easily get back and forth to Prince William County. To me, what's sort of on the horizon there just feels, between the Silver Line, the express lanes, and other things that are happening, just a lot of excitement. We're going into a new year. There's a lot going on. Everywhere I turn, I see, buildings going up and roads being improved, and the economy is, not yet showing any signs. We're still all doing fairly well. And, there's just a lot of opportunity. In Prince William County, we may not have the Silver Line. The express lanes are a game changer. I was grateful to be at the ribbon cutting and talked a lot about the fact that, our 2 huge or 3 commuter lots around the I-6 corridor really are transit nodes at this point, with a lot of buses going either back and forth or up the Dulles corridor to get to some of the jobs that are outside of Prince William County. Really, and that is the fact that it just went to HOV3 the other day, right? So now it's meant to be a commuter road. It's not meant to be a couple driving into work. It's meant to cut back on the traffic on the roads. And I think it was coming on the 12th, we have a new bus service going up the 28 corridor, going up the Dulles Techway. And so, I'm just excited about the future, grateful for all the things that people do to make transportation better. And I'll just end with a recent Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance survey, really talked about what is in the forefront, just open up all the things that are important to people. What's important, is it inflation, crime, and the number one thing was still transportation. It was still transportation in our region, which says, we've made a lot of progress, but we still have, a ways to go. So, having roundtables like this and imparting what's really happening is, I think, really exciting. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of this is about large spending, right? Like when we're talking about the Silver Line, I mean, what a massive investment from local counties that everyone has really put in here, special tax districts, Dulles Toll Road, all of that going on. We talk about the express lanes, obviously it's a public-private partnership. But in this, post-midterm election legislative world, all 3 of you are mentioning, some funding challenges or some things that you're concerned about. Jeff, it seems like you might be most worried about maybe what's on the governor's plate. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm worried about it because of history and precedent. So, in the last General Assembly session, the governor proposed eliminating the gas tax, which, might be a good idea politically, but didn't really want to grapple with the fact that that's $500 million of transportation revenue lost. On top of that, when we back years ago, when the General Assembly deferred NVTA funding to Metro, we were given a lot of promises that they would fulfill their mission to put all that money back in. And all these years later, we're still $40 million behind in that commitment. And so, and then on top of that, there was reduction of the grocery tax, which again, I think, there's some real merit to reducing the grocery tax. And I appreciate that, local governments were made whole for that loss of revenue, but it did create a massive hole in transportation funding that still has not been fulfilled either. And so, if you just look at those three things that, last General Assembly session were brought up and we were screaming about, loss of transportation money. Those are important because, in particular, gas tax and grocery tax are predictable, reliable streams of revenue that can be bonded, that we can use for transportation projects. When you eliminate those in perpetuity, you have a cascading effect in transportation funding that will hurt Northern Virginia and our economy for a long time. And so when you couple that with the fact that, the state is now sitting on a massive budget surplus, and we're trying to get our economy going again in a lot of parts of the state, it would seem like the perfect time to come back and fill those buckets of transportation money, at least back up to where we were just a few years ago. Phyllis, Ann, and I sit on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, and one of the most challenging things we do is look at the billions of dollars in project need that is out there and recognize that we can only fund a fraction of that. And so, to Ann's point about transportation being, still the number one issue for people through the Transportation Alliance, we saw that, we know that, and yet here we are with reducing revenue streams for transportation at the state level. And so I am concerned about that. We obviously have a lot of projects and a lot of need. And I think a lot of people, focus on the big projects, which is fine. But a lot of the things that we're doing at NVTA are also transit projects, they're pedestrian improvements. And, one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now in Fairfax County and really throughout the DMV is an unprecedented increase in pedestrian fatalities and accidents at intersections and in around schools. And so, we're so far behind in pedestrian facilities, even on VDOT streets, that, we can't be cutting transportation funding for maintenance, for small projects, for big projects. And we have these giant holes now at the state level. And it's time, in my mind, for the governor and the General Assembly to fix those and get us back on track, literally.
Yeah. Chair Randall, do you think that we have to get creative about the way we go about funding transportation specifically in Northern Virginia?
So I do. I actually want to kind of expand on what Jeff said about NVTA. In 2018, when it was voted that money would come out of NVTA to help make Metro whole, it was a very short-term solution for a long-term and serious problem. And there was a lot of issues with that. One, NVTA amasses its money by taxing people in Northern Virginia. That's how House Bill 2313 reads. And so, we and NVTA were really worried about that because we don't want NVTA to become the piggy bank for all transportation all across Virginia. Jeff is correct. That money has already been allocated for transportation projects in Northern Virginia. And we were told we would be made whole, and we haven't been made whole yet. And knowing that, unfortunately, Metro is looking right now at some fairly serious funding problems. I am very worried that eyes might turn to NVTA again, and at that point, we will destroy that organization, and we just can't do that. And so, as far as I know, every locality in NVTA has put in their legislative programs to, one, get that $40 million returned, and that should be state money, but also to not ever take any money out of NVTA again. And that doesn't mean that we are not very committed to transit, because obviously we are, but it has to be done correctly. So am I concerned about transportation money? Obviously, yeah, of course I am. We should all be. And, there is a balance between, how much money goes into transit, how much money goes into transportation. Transit includes walking paths and bike paths and bike share programs and Metro and and bus and all those types of things are transit, and we are doing that, and we're focused on that. But it's also important to know that, especially in in Loudoun County and in Annes County, we have some outer towns of our county where we're probably not going to run transit. We're not going to run transit. We're not going to run metro to Lovettsville. We're not going to run metro to Round Hill. And so it is very, very important to be able to have our residents to be able to get around, and even if they chose to get on the road to get to metro, they have to be able to do that. And what we also know is that in Northern Virginia, unlike other places, some places living around transit is less expensive. In Northern Virginia, it's just the opposite. In Northern Virginia, living around transit is very expensive. And so you will find people who maybe can't afford it live further out. And so it's important to be able to have both roads built and kept up road improvements to ensure that everyone has equal chance to move around and get to their jobs, get to their place of worship, get to recreation, get home in time to see the little girl be a daisy in the play, whatever, right? It's important that we're able to do these things. I've said this before, and there's a gentleman named Billy Kiger from Rockingham County who sits on VACO with us, and he always says, you don't have a surplus until you pay your bills. And there are some unpaid bills from the state government to localities. And one of those unpaid bills is the MVTA $40 million. And so before we start, talking about the surplus that the General Assembly has, they may want to, get some of these bills paid.
Yeah. Chair Wheeler, do you think that there's, this give and take between funding transit, funding roads, and it's going to get harder to find those dollars?
I think we'll always be able to find the money for both. And there are, as Phyllis was saying, there are a lot of different kinds. I mean, is a bus going down I-66 in the express lanes, is that transit? Well, it is, it's sort of mass transit. I mean, it's all sort of transit. And I agree, though, that, sitting on the NVTA board with them, the money was just taken away and never, except for retaxing us again to replace some of it, right, was never really replaced. And they're correct in saying that the state does have a surplus. The fact is, and the governor said this the other day at the I-66 ribbon cutting, economic engines are driven by our ability to get around, whether it's by roads or mass transit or the Silver Line. And so I would hope that the General Assembly, as well as the governor's office, would realize the importance of continuing to make really substantial improvements in these areas. I know that Prince William County has benefited greatly by the establishment of NVTA. We have $1.1 billion of projects currently going, and it's not all NVTA money. There's federal money and local money mixed in with that, but that's a lot of improvement going on that wouldn't have existed 20 years ago. There were no funding sources for that. And so, that's, 15 projects that, a third of those will be done by the end of 2023. And so those kind of projects, I hope won't go away, and I don't think they will. There's always this pull between the inner jurisdictions that have high density and mass transit and some of the outer jurisdictions that still need roads. And, for my part, I often say if we want to address climate change, we need to look at the electrification of the outer jurisdictions more, right? I mean, this is where we should be focusing on that, because these are the people who will continue, no matter what, they have to continue using their cars. So I'm ever hopeful that we will continue to get funding from the General Assembly and they won't cut back. I don't see how anyone can think that cutting back on transportation funding is a good thing. It could only hurt our region and really across the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about commuting patterns and the way that things are right now. I don't know if you guys have noticed. I mean, I certainly have. Wednesday seems to be the busiest day on the road right now. But I think it's clear that we're still not back to the way things were, right? We're not back to that Monday through Friday where it was just awful all the time. And you couldn't even get from point A to point B, let alone plan for it in like 30 minutes. So there still are some points and pockets here where you're able to do things, from a predictable commute. But when you talk to, I'm curious for each of you, because you're in such positions where you're kind of affecting change in the way that we think about transportation projects. When you talk to your transportation planners, are they thinking differently with the way that they are thinking of projects? Like, is it no longer something like, oh, we need another metro extension? Is it something like, Chair Randall, like you mentioned, like building vertically, just having places where people can be around a center and really not have to go too far? Chair Randall, why don't you start?
So that's a great question. When we looked at commuting patterns, what we learned is this: the commuting patterns have changed, but the number of trips have not, which I thought was fascinating. And so you have the parent that is working from home now that before could not get up at 1 PM and run to the grocery store and back, right? And so the number of trips are still there, but they're at different times. And truthfully, I don't know that we've seen the settle down from COVID as far as what commuter patterns are going to eventually turn out to be. I think we're still looking at it. We know that they probably will never come back to what they were pre-COVID, but we don't know what they're going to look like in the end. We know that, many employers found that they could get just as much work out of their employees, if not more, allowing them to work from home, and they're not paying, for the brick and mortar buildings for them to sit in, and they're maybe not paying even for the toll road cost and things like that. So they're very different commuting patterns. So I think we have to take a couple more years to see what the commuting patterns kind of settle out to be and how those look. So yes, in Loudoun County, we're having that discussion, and not just for transportation, but for transit. When do we need our buses to run, and how? As we plan, especially around the metro, what will those look like and how? Do we put more buses in for kids to take them to and from events if school buses are not going to run there? And so there's a lot of discussions right now. The truth is, our lives right now are talked about pre and post COVID. I mean, COVID just changed everything for every reason. I mean, even now during the holiday season, we see a huge ramping up in shopping, but it's not what we saw before. If I go to Dulles Town Center Mall, 4 years ago, I couldn't have found a parking space. Right now I can today. People are shopping online. So we do see a lot of different commuting patterns, and we just don't know what they're going to all end up looking like in the end. Now, I will also say that, I am very committed to getting people on transit. And so, we hope to see that and more people use our transit, but we have no idea what that looks like quite yet. I do want to go back one more time to MBTA. As MBTA chair, I will just keep pushing this because Ann said something that was completely right, completely correct. The money that has gone back in the MBTA has, for the most part, been because we've retaxed ourselves for a second time. Mm-hmm. We are not going to retax ourselves for a third time. And so that 40 million has got to come from the state budget. And so thank you, Ann, for reminding me of that.
Jeff, how does this new commuting world affect a place like Tyson's, where the goal there was to capture 100,000 people who were previously driving into Tyson's and get them to live there? Does it help that they can live there?
Yeah, well, before I answer that question, I want to piggyback something that was just said, because I think it's important. We did, get some NVTA money back from taxing ourselves again. But as I said at the I-66 express lane opening, we tax ourselves a lot more up here every time we move. Compared to the rest of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And just from an equity standpoint, when I drive through Interstate 64 and see the massive widening project, and we know 81 is going to be widened, they're not told, and we are told for a lot of our expansions. And so when we talk about extra taxing of Northern Virginia, we really need to be clear in Richmond that there is a threshold for how many times we can reach to the ATM of Northern Virginia every time we need it. And there is a time where we need to get some of our money back here that we invest. And I don't want to sound parochial, but darn it, I'm gonna be, because it's angering to a lot of people, myself included.
And Richmond, No hands on the NBTA, Richmond. Just come on.
Yeah, and so, but to answer your question with Tyson's, I mean, I think a couple things. First, I agree with everything that Phyllis said. I will also say, though, that traffic volumes are back up to pre-pandemic levels, and bus ridership that we just heard through NVTC last week has skyrocketed across the region. And so we are heading at a quick pace back to some level of normalcy. And I say that because even though habits are different and people may be traveling at different times, what isn't different is the need for infrastructure. And so, this is not a time to tap the brakes when it comes to infrastructure. It is a time to continue those investments. And in some cases, we're very far behind. In terms of transit, there's been some interesting things that have been happening. You mentioned Tyson's, and I want to mention something about Tyson's because the Tyson's retail market and residential market is red hot. And the reason for that, a lot of the residential, and talking to the condo sales offices and the owners of those buildings, is that people, even if they're working from home, are desirous of a work environment. And so they're literally being told by people who are buying condos in Tyson's that they want to be in a high density building. They want to go down to the lobby and see other people. They want to walk to a coffee shop. They want to have a gym in their building. They want the things that come with going to work, even if they're not going to work. And so, that is one of the many reasons why the Silver Line and Metro is an investment. We can think things differently in the way in which people want to live. And there's a lot of people who want to live near a metro, even if they're not an everyday user of metro. And so when you think about what the Metro Board is doing right now, they're considering a radical change in fares to do away with peak fare hikes, which I think is really smart. I mean, the trains for the longest time, trains have left, gone into the city in the morning, carrying people from Prince William, Loudoun, Fairfax into the district to work. And then they come back out empty. Then they load up again and they go back into the city. Well, that has all changed now. Metro now can look at a system that moves people in both directions, which is really exciting. They can look at eliminating peak fare because people are riding Metro at all different times of the day. And frankly, I don't think that's a bad thing for the environment. And so I think we have to take this moment and understand that there have been some changes to people's habits, but we can also take this moment to understand there are still great infrastructure needs, and there are ways to form infrastructure around these new habits. And frankly, as I said, when you look at the traffic volumes, they are back to pre-pandemic, exceeding pre-pandemic levels. And so we have to be really smart here about how we plan infrastructure and think about this new way that people are living. Tyson's is a great example where you can do everything you need in one place. And I think there's a lot of people who are looking for that type of lifestyle change. And that's where we need to be smart about land use, not just infrastructure for transportation, but also really smart about how we plan land use in the future to take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah. Chair Wheeler, I was just in Prince William County today doing a story. Beautiful out there. But it is a little bit more wide open, right? I mean, and so how do you, and that's not a bad thing per se, but how does that change, your look on things in terms of a commuting standpoint and where you think we are from a recovery standpoint there?
Well, people are still obviously commuting. And I think it's going to take a couple of years, like Phyllis was saying, to figure out really what the end is going to look like. We really can't have some kind of knee-jerk reaction saying no one's going to go into a building ever again, because I don't think we really know. And given that there are things, in Prince William County, like the VRE, right? That eventually, if you look out 10 years and the Long Bridge is built, that'll be a whole nother, way to get back in and move around, like for, on a daily basis. In Prince William County, we're just about to approve our comprehensive plan, which includes our mobility chapter next week, right? And you can see that there's a lot of focus on removing congestion, moving around within the county. We have a lot of interchanges being fixed. We have a lot of intersections being fixed, really updating them so people can get around, because they are here. We keep on hearing that the cars are back on the roads, and partly that's because they're not on something like the VRE, but it's also because people are driving around. So, I'm looking to the future where there are going to be really also technological solutions, such as instead of having a bus that has a route, you have a bus that has on demand, right? Because you can do something with an app and have smaller buses and moving people around throughout the county. I think we haven't even scratched the surface of how technology might change some of the things and how we get around in regards to that. Just think about how Uber, transformed everything. So, I'm looking to look for the long term. I know someday the Metro might come to Prince William County. It's on our comp plan and people are studying it. But I also know that, NVTA has a whole section on we're about to approve transaction tomorrow, I guess it is, tomorrow night, right? Which is an unconstrained, look at what would we do if we could do everything. Right. And it's $75 billion. But there's a whole bus.
And we don't, by the way, have $75 billion.
Not close.
But there is that whole bus rapid transit section that talks about how we use buses instead of investing in Metro, and Prince William County is part of that. So I think there are a lot of things on the horizon. We just have to look long term and just keep us literally moving in various different ways. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to help with that.
Yeah, one of the more fascinating things that actually happened during the pandemic was you did see bus ridership explode. I mean, it basically doubled when you're talking about Metro bus. And so people were still relying on that and they've kind of stuck with it. I think there's this moniker about buses for whatever reason that it's just not as great as rail. But when you take the bus and when you get used to the bus and you figure out that, it picks me up and drops me off closer to where I need to go, well, guess what? You start to like the bus. And so there probably is a lot more room for the bus to grow. I do want to remind everyone that there's a chat button here. Anyone who's participating in here, I can read the chats, get some questions to these guys. So this is an interactive forum and we can go from that. Okay, I haven't asked about it yet because it's completely obvious, but Silver Line is huge. I mean, I've talked about it enough in my lifetime. It's like one of those projects where I never thought it was going to happen and then it actually happened. Like it was dead, it was brought back to life. And now, all of a sudden I'm at, the Dulles International Airport station. I'm riding a train to Ashburn. You guys were all there. It was great. Success has many parents, orphan has none. And there were plenty of parents out there. So it was great.
Sure.
But just tell me I guess you can take it in any direction you want. I mean, we obviously know that it's the development, what you can do in terms of density, what it means for the airport itself. But should that be it? And Jeff, I'll start with you. Should that be it for Metro? And should they just focus on what they have now? Or is there a need to keep expanding?
Well, I think there's always a thought to expand and that we shouldn't abandon that. But I will say until the issues at the river crossing are fixed, the service is not going to be great. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. We've known
about Roslyn.
Yeah. And you've known, Adam, even way back to, my days on the Metro board, there were, schemes that were being worked to try to maximize throughput. And then you start to jeopardize safety and you have a choke point for the region. And so, to me, the number one priority of Metro needs to be to fix that choke point because that opens up a world for possible extensions. I mean, in Fairfax County, we still have on the horizon extension of the Orange Line to Centerville and beyond. We also have the possibility of extending the Blue and Yellow Line down to Woodbridge and Potomac Mills and Prince William County. And so, those are important extensions that ideally we would love to be putting in place now. The challenge is going to be, and you look at what's happened on the Blue and Yellow Line with reductions in service. The challenge is going to be you're going to have the western part, the Silver Line, Orange Line, and the Yellow and Blue Line continuing to relentlessly compete for space to get across through Roslyn. And to me, that's not a good long-term strategy. A long-term strategy is fix that choke point so that you can provide not only extensions, but good service to the people who might ride those extensions. And so we have to have in our plans these future extensions because as you just mentioned, I mean, think how long it's taken the Silver Line, 60 years. It was envisioned to bring rail to Dulles Airport. And so hopefully it's not 60 years before orange, yellow, and blue lines can be extended, but we can't abandon our hopes to get those done. And I think as a region, and frankly, there's a big incentive for the entire metro system to fix this choke point. This isn't just a Virginia issue, because it does have effects on the entire system and times in the entire system. And so this should be the #1 DMV regional project at Metro to fix, and that opens up a world of opportunity for other expansions.
Yeah, Chair Randall, I got to imagine the thinking in your neck of the woods has to be exponential, because you look at what those metro stations in Ashburn look like, at Loudoun Gateway, what it looked like when they first were building it. And then you even go there now and starting to see the development that's happening. And there's still a lot more space to grow.
Yeah.
So that's where like a real kind of urban planning aspect
Absolutely.
has to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why what I started talking about early is it's what I'm very, very excited about. I don't imagine I'll be chair in 2040 when some of the things that we're seeing now will actually come to fruition. But we voted for our first housing development at the metro station, at the Ashburn station, like about a month ago. And it was very exciting. It was very exciting. And we're talking to some very impressive developments to come into our area. Not to mention, we want to do things like a major art center, possibly a small convention center. You never know what sports teams are out there that may need to have a permanent home. Who knows? Who knows? So there's a lot of things that we're looking at that will happen. I mean, we are lucky in Loudoun County that we have the metro and we have the land. It's not redevelopment, it's new development. But I do want to remind people that, when we talk about mass transit, our heads almost, first and almost exclusively go to metro. The bus system is an extension of a metro, and it is a mass transit as well. And so, we're never going to probably have a metro to Lovettsville, and we shouldn't, right? If we keep our comp plan as it is now, our Western Loudoun County will, it's not going to have a lot more development there, housing development. But we do have fantastic bed and breakfasts and wineries and horse farms and breweries and all types of things that we want people to visit. And we want to have as much of an interconnected bus system in the whole Northern Virginia area as we possibly can. And I say all the time that I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and we had something called the RTD. You could get anywhere, you can't get anywhere in the Metro Denver area on the RTD. You get one transfer, you go anywhere. And so, I would remind us that the transit is more than one thing. And so when we're talking about, further out, because technically, Ann and I's counties are the exurbs, not even the suburbs, right? So so if you have a town that is the furthest town in the exurb, then, you have to look at other transportation options, and the bus is a fantastic option. So, Loudoun County, I think, is, I always say, and people think I'm joking, or I say it because I'm chair, but I think Loudoun's the best county in the country. I really do. I love my county so much, and we're very unique in that we will have an urban policy area. So if you really want to have fairly urban living, where you could, you will live in a mixed use, very walkable community, where you do have dense vertical development and everything there you need, you can do that. If you want to live in a suburban type living structure, you can do that. And if you want to live in a very rural setting, you can do that as well. In Loudoun County, we have 430,000 people. 15% of our population is Western Loudoun County, and it's 2/3 of our land mass. So it's a very large area that is very rural. So you can have any living condition you want to have in Loudoun County. It's what makes it so special. And it also goes back to why I don't want to see any zoning and land use from Richmond, because it would completely ruin areas of Loudoun County that I hold so special. So, we do have this big, huge area and a metro. It's probably the most valuable land on the Eastern Shore. It really is.
All right. Well, we'll put it all on a postcard. I mean, you just summed it all up. That's fantastic stuff. Chair Wheeler, listen, you're not getting out of the football discussion. There was some talk.
I didn't even say football. I said sports team. I said sports team.
I'm very glad to be out of it.
Yeah, right.
I said sports team. I didn't even say what sports team.
Well, you know, there are some things we're still dependent upon the General Assembly for, and I will just leave it at that, you know.
Yeah, well, before that happened, how would you fix I-95, right? Like that's a project of itself. So I
Well,
mean,
you know, and they are making some headway on fixing it and extend express lanes and fixing some of the in and outs and some of the choke points, and some bridge that I just read is going to open up soon. And so they're working on that. And I think, you know, now that they've got 66 finished and they're extending, you know, 495 up to the bridge and everything else, there is going to be some focus on that I-95 corridor. It really has to be, because, you know, I drive by often and see stop traffic, you know, when I'm going the other way. And you know, how we address that, you know, greater minds than me will figure that out. But I do think that that is something that people will pivot to and start looking at. It's more
yeah,
specifically.
that is still, I mean, you might have seen the report the other day, the biggest choke point down at the Occoquan continues to be, you know, the biggest choke point in our entire region.
Yep.
I'm not really sure how you get around that. You know, 95 is the main street of the East Coast. But I do want to go back.
Adam, on that point, you might be able to make news, because we're pressing hard to reconsider the express lanes on 95 and build them properly so that they're not reversible. And we're looking at some design elements where that might be able to fit in. But, you know, frankly, they should have never been built that way in the first place. They should have been built like the Beltway and like I-66. And to me, the first thing we should be doing is pressing to get those express lanes going in both directions all day, every day.
That is certainly news. I mean, how would you find the space, Jeff?
Well, I think if you look strategically along the corridor, there are places where the space already exists. It's just not maximized properly. There's going to be some choke point areas for sure. But if you look at Fairfax County South, creative engineers can fit this in. I'm pretty confident in most of those areas. Obviously, you know, north of there is a different story, but I think if you look at the configuration that's out there now and the amount of space that's available on both sides of those express lanes, there are areas along there with minimal impact where you could fit this in a much less intrusive project than the original one.
And do you want to weigh in on that?
No, I mean, I've heard Jeff talk about that, and it's true. I mean, that was, you know, I wasn't around when that decision was made, and I understand. I mean, it was a first. I mean, we were grateful for that project because it really was the first of its kind in this region, right? That public-private partnership with Transurban, and it has been a game changer for the last 10 years. You know, the question is, how can we improve it? And it's really taking the long view and having someone take a big view. I mean, it's someone who has some vision to go in and say, what can we do, and at least explore that. And because there are definitely choke points, and you know, I've been on the road zooming by when the other side is, all the lanes are stopped up, and I'm sure it's intolerable for people who commute up and down every day on that.
Let me get your thoughts, and I'll just go around the horn here on the new Metro general manager. Obviously has a lot of energy. The previous general manager, I said this over and over again, you know, if you go back to the previous 3 general managers, they all left under an NTSB investigation, including Paul Wiedefeld. You hope that that's not the case going forward here. You know, we still haven't gotten any sort of complete closure on the 7000 series rail cars. But what do you see as this general manager? I mean, Jeff, you kind of mentioned it, the Roslyn stuff being his biggest challenge, but they got to get riders back as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I think this general manager is doing the right things. Frankly, I think turning some things upside down and looking at them differently is needed at Metro. And some of the bold things, I mean, I mentioned earlier, you know, looking at this fare structure and recognizing times have changed, and maybe we need simpler system and flat fares and ways to get people on the system. You know, those conversations are difficult to have. And the fact that the general manager is throwing those out and we're talking about them is a long time coming. And I do think that, you know, there has been a huge emphasis at Metro on catching up on some of the safety issues. But as you said, you know, there's still some out there lingering that are outstanding. And, you know, I think this general manager has the energy and the tenacity to look at things entirely differently. I mean, one of the things that I like about him, and I never thought I would say this, you know, because, you know, I generally think to come into the DMV area, it's kind of hard to understand all the various pieces and the politics and how all this stuff works together. Coming from another area can be a real challenge. In this case, I think from his standpoint, it's a real asset. because he doesn't, sometimes not knowing all the baggage of how we got to where we are can be helpful. And I think some of the ideas that he's thrown out are ideas that we should have been talking about a long time ago. But I'll be really clear on this point. If Metro long-term doesn't come up with some form of dedicated revenue, we can talk about general managers and all of these things relentlessly, and we'll in this vicious cycle. I mentioned NVTC earlier. We got a report at our last meeting about transit systems very similar to Metro. And the one thing that Metro doesn't have that every other major transit system has is a dedicated source of revenue that they can long-term plan off of, cuts down some of the parochialism between the jurisdictions that share Metro, and it makes it much more reliable to plan long-term capital projects, and some of the things that we've talked about here. So, they need a strategy. We need a strategy in the DMV for a sustainable, dedicated revenue source for Metro. And to me, management issues aside, some of them are because of a lack of funding and reliability. Some of them are just pure mismanagement. I think we have an opportunity here with a new general manager, with the excitement of the Silver Line, with the fact that we need to get riders back on the system, to really go back and look at the core governance elements of Metro and budget issues at Metro and say, look, the way this was set up doesn't work anymore. And it puts tremendous strain on local governments in Virginia. It's one thing when Maryland, can just pay, the state can just pay their Metro subsidy. But I will tell you, all of us at the local government, I mean, Ann's not in the compact yet, but I can't wait for her to get into the compact and start paying for Metro. But for those of us in the compact, I will tell you, it is a major challenge for us to be able to keep up with the funding requests that Metro has on the backs of real estate. And we just need to be honest about that. It's not sustainable. It makes housing unaffordable. And it creates a strain in Northern Virginia that other people in the region, particularly in Maryland, don't understand because their state pays those bills. And so, it's far past time to really address that issue. And to me, this is a perfect opportunity to do it with the storm that we have here of, ridership issues related to COVID and the excitement of the new extension of the line and people getting excited about Metro again and understanding that for the system to work, it has to be paid for.
If I could add a little bit to that, I agree with everything my friend Jeff said. A couple of things. First of all, I think Mr. Clark jumped in and is doing a yeoman's job, and I think it's a very tough job to do. Obviously, I very much appreciate that he has decided that he is going to have regular meetings with Ray Jackson from the ATU, because you can't do any of this without the support of your workers. And he's going to meet with them and talk to them. It's going to be an ongoing relationship. That is fantastic. You see him all over the place. He's high energy and has good ideas. But the truth is, Jeff is right. Maryland and DC, their part of their Metro compact comes out of their state or central government. In the case of the district, in the case of Maryland, it's the state government. Whereas in Virginia, it was decided many years ago that the localities would pay that Metro compact charge. So it's very different the way they do it. I have said this, and I will say it again. I've said this since I've been on this board. I am shocked at how little the federal government pays into Metro. And when you think about Metro, our Metro moves the federal government workforce. Maybe somebody sitting in Kansas doesn't know why our Metro is important to him, but it is because when they need FEMA money, when they get their monthly checks, when they need to talk to the VA, it is because that the Metro has moved the employees in to pay for that. It should never be a time that Fairfax County is paying just about as much in their Metro funding as the federal government. And I have called on our representatives in Washington, D.C. To put legislation forward to not just get the PREA funding that we get every year or the $5 million, but to actually ask for a larger dedicated source of revenue for Metro. Our Metro is very important to the country. If our Metro goes down, if it is not working, then the country's federal government workforce is severely damaged. And so in addition to this funding allocations that we have right now coming out of the localities being outdated, in addition to Richmond having to understand that if Northern Virginia is the financial engine of Virginia, and Metro is the financial engine of Northern Virginia, then Virginia needs to put money in and not take it from MVTA ever again. But also, if Metro is the system that moves Metro bus and transit, by the way, and rail, that moves the federal government, then the federal government should be putting more in there. And I consider Mark Warner, Tim Kaine, and Jennifer Wexton to be colleagues and friends. I implore them to put legislation forward to put more money into, to get more money into Metro. In Loudoun County, we do have the Metro Tax District, but our 70% of our of the MVTA's 70-30 split, I'm sorry, our 30% of the MVTA's 70-30 split, our 30% goes to Metro. It's a pass through to our Metro, so that we don't have to do it all on the backs of property owners. And so we are doing all that we can at the county level. We really are. We really are. It is time for the state government and the federal government to pull their weight when it comes to a permanent source of revenue in Metro.
And your thoughts?
I like that idea that the local people don't have to pick it up. So you guys fix it, get that set, and then we can also join it. It can be expanded. But I mean, you're right. We are one of the only regions that it's all based on local, and this gets back to Northern Virginia carrying more than our fair share sometimes of certain things in the Commonwealth. And, what I did see when the new gentleman came and spoke to MW when we were there that day, he obviously has a lot of energy, and he obviously and is excited about making changes. But I know that people in those positions can often get worn down really quickly when they face a brick wall and they face the insurmountable problems that sounds like they're being presented. So I'm grateful that if Phyllis and Jeff can fix that up from a funding standpoint, and then we'll just sort of waltz in and we'll be good to go.
Yeah, then you'll be in the compact. There you go. It'll get taken. Jeff, let's talk about the Legion Bridge really quickly. In my opinion, short of 95, that's the second biggest choke point that we're dealing with trying to get across the Potomac. Maryland is like, what's going on? I mean, are they talking to you? Are they telling you what they're doing? They're supposed to rebuild the bridge, right?
Yeah, so we've not had conversations with the new administration in Maryland. I do think that we're going to get there. This project is very much alive. I do think the American Legion Bridge project is going to happen. I do think that there may have to be some modifications on the Maryland side, and I respect that the new administration coming in, this is a generational project. Wants to look under the sheets and make sure everything looks right to them before they move forward. And I get that. But I think what our job in Virginia has to be is to just keep pressure on to get this project done, and to remind our friends in Maryland. And I will say, I hear this from people in Maryland all the time, that all the economic development, all the transportation improvements are happening in Virginia. And there's a frustration in Maryland over that. And so I do think that, we need to keep the pressure on a couple things. One, we need to finish our section of the Beltway from Springfield to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge to put pressure on Maryland on that side of the Beltway. And then we're obviously finishing the 495 next component now, which leads up to the American Legion Bridge. But we've got to keep doing what we're doing and keep inching in closer to the Maryland line. And Maryland, I know that they understand this. There are so many people from Maryland that commute into Virginia every day, either coming across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. If you go look at the Huntington Metro Station, half the parking lot has Maryland license plates on it. And clearly, if you go across the American Legion Bridge and look at all that traffic going into Tyson's Corner to work, and so the pressure is on in Maryland to do something. The question is, let's not take too long. looking at this. Let's take a quick look at it and let's make sure we get these projects done. And our role in Virginia should be to just keep the pressure on and make sure that, you know, we don't walk away from any component of this project. It's way, way too important. The American Legion Bridge project is the most important project in Fairfax now that the Silver Line is up and running. And, you know, we know that BRT on Route 1 is a critical need in the county, but I've largely have that already funded. And so that one's going to happen. We got to make sure that the American Legion Bridge happens.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, you know, Jeff is completely right. And the timing is important to get this done. You know, what we know won't happen is a second bridge crossing. We know that's not going to happen. And we know that's not going to happen because, you know, I went to and did some research on when the first briefing on a second bridge crossing was given. It was during the Kennedy administration, literally. We have been talking about a second bridge crossing since the Kennedy administration. So when Jeff says, let's not take too long, he's really not kidding. And, you know, I have gone over to my counterparts in Maryland, 5 or 6 times now. And it is clear that it's not just no, but a heck no, there will be no second bridge crossing. And so the American Legion Bridge is vitally important. And, you know, it's funny because when I asked, why won't you even have the conversation about a second bridge crossing? I was given 3 answers. One, they have now made much of the land where there would be it would originate from in Maryland. They put that land in conservation easement. So that land's not even available anymore. 2, I was told that they believed it would take ridership or business from BWI and give it to Dulles and possibly National. And 3, and I thought this was a really interesting statement. They said it will bleed the best and the brightest off from Maryland because of what Jeff just said. So much of the jobs and the technology are happening in Virginia. So it just does not, for many reasons, it just does not behoove them to do it. And so the American Legion Bridge is what we have to, is the bridge crossing we have to see addressed as soon as possible.
Chair Wheeler, do you see that kind of competition when you talk with anyone from Maryland, you know, in terms of cross-state, cross-boundary, what's happening in each place?
You know, I do when we talk about bioscience and some of the getting the businesses into Prince William County versus the bioscience up in Maryland. So from a work standpoint, you know, I do run into people who live in Maryland who work in Prince William County. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but that, you know, there are people if you look in our area who drive miles and miles every day to commute, and we can't be lost. And that's why I think it's really great that we do operate generally as a region. You know, we call it the DMV, and we sit on things like COG and TPB where it is a regional answer. You know, and I know that they have had problems in Maryland, and it's maybe not necessarily the bridge, but it's what comes after the bridge, right? And so to me, that's sort of 2 different issues, right? And because we've seen that in TPB with some pushback and changes. But, you know, as someone who has traveled over that bridge for many years, I can tell you that it definitely needs to be, even from a, you know, this goes back to a crossing, but just from a strategic point of resiliency for the region, we have to have a better bridge, which is why resiliency for the region would actually call from a security standpoint for a second crossing. But it doesn't sound like that will ever happen, unfortunately, because it is, you know, if one crossing goes away, it's always good to have something. It's a backup for that resiliency that we talk about in
safety,
right? And that sort of gets lost. So
sounds like Chair Randall is being told flat out no, that's
flat
not
out no, flat out. For multiple people, flat out no, because I have, I mean, every time I go to NACO, National Association of Counties, I bring it up and they're like, stop talking to us, right? Flat out no, that's not going to happen.
All right, I'm getting a question in our chat here. I'm going to go to it. On rail funding, since it appears that the feds are not returning to work to take the subway away from the Fed employee and give it to the Metro operating side. So it sounds like this person is asking, you know, I guess there are a fair number of federal employees who still get a monthly stipend to ride Metro. Would it make sense financially to kind of take that away and give that to Metro? Is that a way to fund the system Anyone want to offer their thoughts on that?
Well, I would just say I would not give up on the federal government not going back to work, because if we concede that, we've got a big long-term structural problem. I don't think the federal government's going back to 5-day-a-week work, but I think they need to, go to some hybrid level where Metro would still be essential to the federal workforce. And I agree with the comments that have been made earlier about, the fact that so many federal riders use this gives us a chit in working with our federal delegation to try to force more federal dollars in to support the system. And so I don't want to do anything that signals that we are giving up on the federal workforce using the system. That said, the monies that, most federal workers get, the transit benefit that they get, Metro doesn't get that money unless it's being used. And so, ultimately, if we took it from these workers and just gave it to Metro, I think that the problem would be the message that we would be sending on throwing in the towel and the federal workforce going back to the office. And I don't want to do anything that even signals that, because as we said earlier, it's too early on some of these things to draw conclusions. I think it's way too early to conclude that the federal government's not going to change their operations moving forward. And I do think they're going to go to a permanent hybrid situation. And so your Wednesday problem is probably still going to be bad.
Yeah.
I would suspect that Fridays and Mondays are probably days that are going to be slower for the foreseeable future. But, I do think that the federal government is going to go back to a hybrid situation, and we really need to count on that and lobby for that.
Not to mention, I don't know the exact amount that the federal governments get, but I can't imagine that it would cover the shortfall in Metro. Nowhere close. I mean, it sounds like, a Band-Aid on a gaping hole. And so one, we want to get people, we want to, I would associate myself with Jeff's comments, but two, no, no, we need to have, and that's not a dedicated source of revenue anyway. That's not what a dedicated source of revenue is. We need to have dedicated sources of revenue that are stable, that are going to Metro at all times. And taking money from the workers is not that.
Ann, any thoughts on that?
Not being part of that, I do think that we do have a lot of federal workers coming out of all the way from Prince William County going into DC. And so I do believe that they will get back, that, the structural change that happened during COVID is not permanent. I mean, it is, somewhat of it has changed, but I think we will see the federal government going back to where they were, just for a variety of reasons. And a lot of it depends on the economy and what's happening and so many other factors. And I think that we saw things change so quickly in one direction, they could also change in the other direction. And I think we have to sort of keep that in mind. So I'm not going to write off federal workers ever going back. I can't imagine that the government would work that way. So I'm sure they will.
Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have a hard out at 45 here?
I've got about 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Okay. So let's get in. Let's do a lightning round here if we can. Are you going to get the FBI in Fairfax County? What's going on?
Absolutely. We're going to get the FBI. Come on, Adam. We've got the best site. We've got the synergy to Quantico. And I will tell you, a lot of conversation lately around equity. I think that, if you look at the area where the FBI would be located in Fairfax County, and you look at the I-95 corridor that, my friend Ann is very familiar with, in terms of equity, there is tremendous need for job growth and opportunity for people in that corridor. And if you look at the demographics in that area and the incomes in that area, we put in our application a very strong case to support equity and opportunity for people who need it as a part of this process. So I know there's been a lot of focus from Maryland on that lately. But, I think that's because, frankly, we've got the best site, the best proposal, and a lot of equity advancements that can happen with the FBI. And so, last thing I'll say, Adam, I know it's lightning round, I'm breaking the rules, but I think it's important. If they don't go here, the GSA still has a massive problem. And that is that the GSA is under mandate to build facilities in places like the DMV that have transit connections. They are sitting on the largest wooden truss warehouse east of the Mississippi, on top of one of the region's busiest transportation centers in the Franconia Springfield Metro Station. That is their statement. And the GSA, the reason why the GSA warehouse is on the short list every time a federal relocation happens is because they have a massive problem there that they have to fix. And I believe it's going to happen with the FBI. If it doesn't happen with the FBI, it will happen because they have to redevelop that site.
Gotcha. Chair Randall, what's the better airport right now, Dulles or Reagan National?
Oh my gosh, really? I shouldn't have to say it, but Dulles is the best airport sitting in the best county in the country. I mean, it's not even hard. Obviously, Dulles is such an important airport. We just celebrated their 60th anniversary. Jeff and I were both there for that. It is an economic engine for Loudoun County in many ways. We now have an airport where people who can come in and get on the metro in the airport and go, anywhere in the DMV. So it's pretty amazing. And so Dulles is a wonderful airport, and we're the only airport in the area with room for growth. Reagan National does not have any slips left. They have nowhere to grow. They cannot get any larger. So we can have growth, and we are almost every couple of months adding new international flights all the time. We just added one for Accra, Ghana. And so it's very exciting to have Dulles Airport as part of Loudoun County's family and our government. And it's wonderful.
And what's the biggest transportation project you want to see get taken care of in Prince William County?
Oh, wow. So many. I mean, some are finishing VRE stations, perhaps in the Potomac area. We're, like I said, we're at $1.1 billion right now. So we're actually doing so many projects. They talked about the bottleneck over at the Occoquan, crossing the Occoquan and looking at that and trying to think of some innovative ways would really help. We're so tied to the I-95 corridor at the east end of the county that something that helps 95 really makes a difference. We have so many great things going on. It's hard to know, what else we really need. We have a list of projects that we've put in for at NVTA, and they've been very good to us. But, fixing some of the I-95 corridor would probably be one of my main things, because there's so many important things happening at the east end of the county. You never know.
Right, exactly. You never know. You never know. All right, guys. Well, I do want to wrap this up in a nice, tidy fashion. I did hear news. There's good news. I've got at least 2 stories out of this, so this is fantastic. And I do want to thank everyone for participating in another great conversation. You guys are so great and always willing to offer so many good insights and inputs. Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you so that we can get Chairman McKay out of here in a timely fashion.
All right, well, we excuse Chairman McKay. I know you're on your way to your next event, always in motion. Thank you, Adam, for an outstanding job chairing the panel and keeping the conversation lively and interesting. We're so delighted you've obtained some news here. We'll look for the stories in Channel 4 in the coming days. And Doug, thank you for putting this together once again. Thank you for everyone who attended. One point, we nearly had 45 attendees, so that's an excellent turnout. And again, I hope to see you all in person next December for the 2023 Transportation Roundtable.
Absolutely.
Happy holidays, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.